Greetings to all. I hope you all are doing fine. Let's try something different today. So, I'm going to read a passage from Ramesh Balsekar's book, Confusion No More. The question is the manifestation real? And Ramesh says, it is real and unreal. The question is the manifestation real or not? Is misconceived. The manifestation is both real and unreal, real to the extent that it can be observed, unreal on the basis that it has no independent existence of its own without consciousness. So, the only thing that has independent existence of its own is reality, and that reality is consciousness. Consciousness is the only reality, everything else is a reflection of that reality within itself. Let's see. Do you see this jar? Now tell me one thing. Is the space inside the jar different from the space that is outside? When I'm moving this jar, is the space inside moving, or is the jar moving in space? The trouble is that we feel the space inside the jar when this boundary is here. This boundary that you can see is here. The space inside thinks that it is conditioned by this jar. Similarly, the mind body instrument, when it experiences consciousness that is identified, or what we call as the separate self, the separate self believes that the instrument is all there is, and that what is outside is separate from what is here. The consciousness which is identified, or the ego, is separate from what is experienced in others. That is what the prevalent belief is. But you see, this is the whole illusion. The space inside the jar is the same that is outside the jar. So even if the jar breaks, the space inside does not break. Nothing happens to the space. So this is the illusion. And to that effect, sage Ashtavakra says, just as the all-pervading space is both inside and outside the jar, so also the eternal and all-pervading consciousness is immanent in all beings and objects. And I will read one more paragraph from Ramesh. He says, the boundary of the pot may appear to condition and limit the space within the jar, but in fact, space as such cannot be conditioned by the jar, which itself exists in space. Similarly, although the universal consciousness may appear to be conditioned by the individual psychosomatic apparatus, all phenomenal objects are merely appearances in consciousness. So the whole idea is that nothing exists outside consciousness. This jar, which you see, has no independent existence outside consciousness. It is made up of consciousness. That is how it is discovered. That is how it is known. So it is also made up of the same knowing. Just like all other objects are also known through that same knowing. So it may feel that the space inside is conditioned by this container, but that's not true. The container is an arrangement in space. The container borrows existence from space. Without space, there would be no container. So, what is the understanding here? The understanding is you are not the limited mind body instrument that you believe yourself to be. Identification with the limited aspect of consciousness, which is the separate self or the ego, brings pain and suffering. Because ego or the separate self has its own story, it believes in its own stories of limitations. But when the same ego, through awakening, sees its unreality, sees the vastness that it really is, the infinity that it is, then life becomes peaceful because the movement of mind, the ego mind, becomes restricted. It understands that everything comes with the dualistic opposite. So there is a natural acceptance of things the way they are. So there is no fear of death because even if the instrument breaks, nothing happens to the consciousness. And knowing of oneself as the infinite consciousness brings about this realization. It hits at the root of this fear. But till we continue to believe that we are this limited mind body organism and whatever is happening here, and the brain function is all there is, then we remain in fear. Then we remain in continuous search of peace, bliss, happiness, trying to make the instrument better. You know, the space inside the jar is trying to make itself safe and secure, forgetting that it is the space that is outside. It is unconditioned, it is unaffected. It doesn't matter if the jar stays or breaks, nothing happens to space.